What is up, all you GBA D-League type people? This is Tom. I'm here bringing you guys the Week 3 power rankings. Now, I'm not sure if Aster has explained it already, but him and I were unfortunately not able to get together this week, unable to record, like we usually do. Between scheduling and work and everything, it just wasn't meant to be. So we are recording separate audio tracks. This might get cut out, but what I'm going to do is go through from 12 to 1 and just give my thoughts about different coaches, where I felt like they ranked similar to every week, just without, obviously, the discussion that Aster and I usually have. This is not going to be a trend moving forward. Just want you guys to realize that, there are some hurdles to, attempt to get over, but we'll do better moving forward.
So yeah, as Tom said, we had some trouble scheduling this week, so what I'm going to do is basically, I'm going to let Tom's part that he sent me roll, and then I'm going to give my explanations as to why my rankings are the way that they are. Obviously, we're not going to have a back and forth. We're not going to have any discourse this week. I'm going to try to play off a little bit of what Tom said from time to time, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty disconnected, unfortunately, for this week. It's going to sound a little bit different than your usual PRs, but we're going to try to do our best to get all our points across and whatnot, so I'm going to let Tom start us off.
First off, at number 12, I have the Toronto Leaf Storms. Someone who I have no fucking idea why the hell I moved out of number 12. There was this... The thing with Sohan is that I didn't understand what the hell he was doing from beginning to end. Just so many confusing aspects of his gameplay. Mainly the fact that he's relying on things like Pyroar and Curum and even non-Z Manaphy to be his designated win cons when he has things like Hoopa U and a Mega Pinsir, which he hasn't even fucking brought yet, right? It's just a lot of confusing little things, like half of his roster is still sitting on the bench. He hasn't brought Mega Pinsir, which, support or not, you're not bringing one of the most threatening mons on your roster, and you're bringing the same 7 or 8 mons, and even the same set for a third week. Dude, Shopple, Counter, Registeel, stop bringing the set. A, you can't use it. B, when you do use it, you use it poorly. And C, once you use it and it doesn't work, the Registeel set is basically a rock machine and then it dies. That's it. So the thing is, he's just playing with half the deck that he has to his disposal, and then he's making just really bad plays or not thinking. Namely, the fact that Danza brought in Silvally, which practically screamed that it was scarfed, but he still kept in his Hoopa U and decided to check with Hoopa to see if the Silvally was in fact scarfed. It was, spoiler, and Hoopa U died. As compared to switching into something like Manaphy or Pyro, which despite rock damage, those two weren't as important as a scarfed Hyperspace Fury, which would have blown back the vast majority of Danza's team, but he chose to let it go because I don't fucking know why, man. So, I don't know what to say about Sohan. He needs to do something better. I'm not really sure what. Maybe make some transactions, maybe fire his front office, a lot like Randy did. But he needs to figure out something, and something quick, because whatever he's doing now, it ain't fucking working, dude.
The big thing for me with Sohan is that he didn't really take advantage of the fact that Danza was letting his team get weakened. Obviously, Danza was very careful about what he let get weakened. However, I really feel like Sohan should have gone into Hoopa Unbound earlier when the Alolawak was in. Instead, he brings in Manaphy, which it's very apparent that is completely hard-walled by the Drampa on the other side. Decides to fire off a Surf, and as a result, he doesn't gain any momentum, he doesn't get anything out of the turn. Obviously, Weavile could have been a pursuit set, and going for Hyperspace Fury, for example, could have landed him in a precarious spot where he would have ended up dying because the Weavile wasn't weakened yet at that point. However, I really feel like he should have brought in his offensive powerhouses earlier on rather than his setup sweeper and Manaphy, which pretty much just did nothing and died. So that's a big one for me. Again, Counter, Registeel, once again, not working this week, as Tom said, so that's something that we're going to have to see changed up, and he is going to have to start bringing that Pinsir, because if he doesn't, then he's not going to get anywhere, and he drafted it for a reason. It's one of the biggest threats, as we know, in Draft League format. Obviously, Danza had checks to it, Tornadus is faster, things like that, but honestly, that thing could have put in a lot of work, and I would have really liked to see it come, so hopefully he fixes that up next week. I'll let Tom hop into his number 11.
But number 11, I have the Exeter Chief Electivires, another player who's been, really, really on the downswing, especially this week where he just got absolutely bent the fuck over. Melon has been equal to that of like a flash in the pan. He did really good week 1 against Greg, and then from there it's kind of just been like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're really not convincing anyone that you're meant to be here. He basically let Deebs do whatever, from the get-go, switching out Zygarde into Mew, thinking that was a better check to a Charizard X instead of attacking what was in front of him. I mean, 1,000 arrows, even to a regular Zard, is still going to do a pretty good chunk of damage and would force him to Mega Evolve, and, whether you die or not, you get an idea for what the Zard is. It just didn't work, obviously we see that because he lost by such a large margin. Some of his switches were a little weird. He switched in the non-Mega Zard Y against Zard X, which is already at like +1 and Toxic, as compared to leaving in and the Sleep Lax. Like, the Lax was roughly useless, and it pretty much fucked up Victory Bell for the long run, because without the Sun, Victory Bell had no chance of even trying to save him differential points in the late game. So it just didn't... Just things he did were, I think a byproduct of him being on tilt after the Toxic miss from the Rotom. But, Sludge Bombing at the end instead of Giga Draining with Victory Bell against a Neoligo. Like, just a bunch of misplays that, from the get-go, he wasn't really in a position to win. From turn 1, then the Toxic just kind of set it in stone that Deebs was going to come away with a really big win. And if you ask me, Melon felt that loss. And right here is going to determine, does he recover and move forward and attempt to try and bring back his season, or just continue to let it slip and be, that person on the roster for whomever he has left that looks at him and goes, oh, well, he's going to play himself, So he has to tighten it up, and he has to fix something, because I feel bad for him, honestly. Like, I rag on him a lot, but I've been in the position where, one move determines whether you get absolutely fucked or you win. And this week, it was just him getting screwed by a Toxic miss. So I'm going to drop him now to the second to last spot, because I'm not convinced anymore. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's supposed to be. I don't know if that week 1 match was a fluke because Greg played himself, but we got to see.
Yeah, Melon for me is my number 10. There's only one team below him. I agree with a lot of what Tom said. I think the turn 1 switching out into a Mon that was built to take on Zard and then just couldn't is very disappointing from Melon. I think that he could have done a lot better there, and then it just went downhill from there. Even if he had gotten the Toxic off with Rotom, the amount of turns that it would have taken for the Zard to get worn down, even if that first Toxic landed, I don't think would have saved him at all. His game was shot from the moment he switched out the Zygarde. I want to see better prep from Melon Tosh. The lead matchup, he has Zygarde in against Zard. Zard doesn't kill Zygarde. You can easily 1,000 arrows. If he goes for a D-Dance, then you can switch into your Mew. He takes 2 rounds of Rocky Helmet. You're getting off Earth Powers or Foul Plays or whatever you decide to run for the Zard, and then you pretty much deal with it after that. You E-speed it when it finally takes the final Rocky Helmet hit with the Zygarde, or you have another revenging mechanism to it, perhaps a faster Scarfer somewhere on the team. So I think that he did not deal well with the most apparent, obvious, and threatening Mon to his team. I think that's a very big setback for him, and hopefully he's able to fix that moving forward and really be able to identify what threatens him, what doesn't, and be able to manage those things. So that's it for Melon Tosh. I'm going to jump right away into Tom's number 10, who he'll be talking about, and my number 8, actually. I have him a little bit higher. We have Greg. Now, Greg, this week, I feel like he really made a comeback, and Tom won't necessarily agree with me, but I really feel like Greg had a very strong game this time around, despite beating Aaron, who I have lower than him. I think that he brought the right sets, he made the right switches, he made the right calls every single turn. There wasn't a lot of flaw in his thought process, in his commentary, in his building, his play. So I really feel hopeful for Greg that he'll be able to bounce back starting this week. Looking very good. His play early game was just fantastic, and the way that he was able to check the remainder of Aaron's offense fantastic, phenomenal. I loved this game from him, and I hope to see more of this in the future.
Now, despite beating Aaron, there's still a few things about his match that, he did well, but I'll explain in a minute why I'm not moving him up. Greg did a really good job at pivoting between the Heatran and the AV Manchow, which was a very good bring this week to effectively scout and weaken down the Hydreigon with its own Life Orb. I loved seeing Greg play his own game, which he hasn't done in the first 2 weeks, and grab a much needed win. It was also cool seeing all 3 of his free agents making an impact while also immediately creating a W for him that I don't really think he had, in the first 2 weeks. And then even seeing Masharna do what I wanted it to do against Aster's Megalopi. I know he's not here to hear this, but he'll hear this. But because of, damage rolls and fuck you Aster, it didn't get to do what I wanted to do. But in this case, Masharna did a pretty good job at stopping the Mega Kangaskhan, which I definitely appreciated. It's kind of what I feel Masharna is pretty decent at, being that type of, Rocky Helmet wall type thing that could be a really annoying little pink fetus. So, now the reason I'm not moving Greg up is because of the fact that he beat someone who has barely escaped a victory in the previous week, beating Goldzilla 1-0. Basically. So, we're talking about someone who also has barely escaped getting W's, otherwise being pounded, same way Greg, has basically beat someone who isn't all that convincing in the first place. So, I feel like this section right here between, whether you're talking about, Melon, Greg, Goldzilla, and even Aaron, all 4 of these teams are just extremely interchangeable. Like these 4 spots amongst Aster and I could have been in any order because each of them are kind of in limbo. Are they convincing or are they garbage? They're just right in that gray area between make it or break it. But they gotta decide now because they don't have that many weeks left to really either bring back the season or start like showing anyone anything. So at number 9, I have the New York Empoleon. Another person who I feel did a really good job, and despite winning against a better opponent, he did lose to Aaron, so I'm going to keep him below Aaron, at least for this week, because I'm just going to be a little consistent on now in the early season as to who beat each other, rather than later on. We'll definitely have a clearer picture as to who really rises above and who falls. So Goldzilla did a really good job at getting up Stealth Rocks with the Scarf Drill, which I wasn't really convinced was going to be as effective as it was. And that effectively KO'd Rotom Heat, which gave Randy a lot less switches into many of Goldzilla's threatening mons. Goldzilla played really well with Ditto, which really reminded me of how Geo used Ditto. And the offense of his pressured Randy to a point that it just allowed Drill in the later game and Ditto to effectively pressure, especially the Mega Lopunny. I feel like the only way that Randy could have prevented any of that was to not Mega with Mega Lopunny as soon as he did, but he was, like I said, he was forced to do such a thing in order to, knock out a lot of Goldzilla's threats. So Goldzilla played really well. Don't know much to say about him, but he scored a really necessary W that I think this could start moving him forward in the right direction in terms of his momentum.
Now, Tom did say that we have him a little bit lower, but Goldzilla still did move up 3 spots for us. He moved out of the number 12 position, and Sohan's down there now. So Goldzilla really showed us that he's capable of really controlling a match, which we hadn't seen yet. That's really what was missing from his play. He was able to evaluate what he needed in the late game, what he didn't, made a few risky but rewarding plays, such as getting up rocks with the drill, as Tom mentioned. Really saved the Ditto for the late game to where it could just sweep. A lot of his success in this game came from Randy misplaying a little bit with the way that he set up his end game. It was very hard to avoid, though, because of the fact that the drill was scarfed. And Scarf Drill didn't look like it was going to put in a lot of work at the beginning of the game, but again, because Randy decided to bring Sub-Celesteela with no recovery, then he played himself into a situation where he no longer had the Celesteela, and it was very, very easy for Drill to come in, Iron Head Sweep. Yes, it got a flinch on the Celesteela, but Victini plus Ditto that were still around. Victini still had a Shuka Berry. There were still so many options for Goldoa at the end of the game. I really feel like he controlled it the whole way through. And moving up 3 spots is not a bad thing. Obviously, he's still 1 and 2. We need to see more from him. That'll come in future weeks. I'm really liking how good it's looking. Very comparable to Greg in a lot of ways, as Tom said. They both look like they're going to sort of have improvement as of right now. So hopefully that is the case. We'll see what happens to Goldoa next week. Right now we both have him at number 9. So I'll let Tom continue on with his number 8, who happens to be my number 11, and then I'll explain why I have Aaron a little bit lower.
Next up, we have Aaron and his Calgary Infernape. Like I said, he lost to Greg, and he really did play himself. And even besides him playing himself, just a lot of things in this match just really didn't go his way. You know, the rolls with the Archeops in the lead, even after the recreation that didn't KO the Coco, that sucked. Sort of put him on his heels. And then him getting rocks up the Clefable against the Coco, which then went for Gigavolt Havoc and basically turned Clef into an Unmon versus Greg. That, you know, basically made Clefable useless against Greg. And then from there, it was just legitimately a landslide. Aaron threw away Mons, whether it was Clefable, Hydreigon, or even Decidueye, to the point where he choked the game away. Which, you know, ironically, Greg was doing for the first 2 weeks. You have Aaron now, who is in some serious need of help, and basically handed Greg a victory the same way Greg handed Zazo a victory last week. It sucked to watch, and a loss like this is really what you look at as an analyst and think to yourself, well, is Aaron legit, or is he just going to get wins off of someone who is right around his skill level or below? You know, he needed this win in order to prove that his win last week was momentum rather than just a one-time thing.
Yeah, Aaron is sort of slipping in the sense that, as Tom mentioned, he doesn't seem like he's able to compete with any level higher than him in terms of skill. That's sort of what we're seeing. That's what we're getting the impression of with all of his plays, even with his commentary a lot of the times. No offense to Aaron, but the way that he sacked off his Decidueye, especially the fact that he could have gone for another Roost, gotten out of range of Ice Beam into Ice Beam, from the Goodra after light screening, and then really become a threat to Greg's team. Honestly, Greg didn't have a lot to deal with the Decidueye. He would have had to pivot into his Scizor and really try to get off a lot of damage through either U-turning or whatever the coverage was that the Scizor had to deal with the Decidueye. That was really the only way, and the fact that Aaron just threw it out was really disappointing. Taking the Gigavolt from the Coco with the Clefable, letting the Coco come in as he rocked up, which is, I want to say, not low skill play, but it's something that as you become more accustomed to constantly playing games, whether it be ladder, whether it be league format, you know that your opponent is pressured to switch out. They have a sack that can no longer come in on rocks after, and you don't go for the Moonblast on that turn, which effectively ruins your Clefable for the rest of the game. So there are a lot of little things that Aaron has to fix or get used to. It comes with time, but it's kind of scary because he's really down low, and he's very down low for me. He's in at my number 11 just because I feel like, especially with the restriction on the type of team that he has, I can't see him getting many wins from here on till the end of the season, so I'm not too hopeful. But that's it for Aaron. I won't keep bragging on the Calgary Infernape. I'll let Tom take us into his number 7.
At number 7, we have the Calgary Flame Wheels, someone who absolutely dominated this week. You know, made a really ballsy play the first turn, and from there it was just off to the races, and it was just a show of how much can Charizard destroy, and then what cleans up after Zard, you know, basically goes down. It was really, like I said, it was really ballsy, him going for DD on the first turn, but he really didn't have a reason not to, especially when he didn't have to Mega Evolve, which is really smart. And I think he was even given more of an opportunity to set up and start damaging things from when Melon brought in the Mew, and the Toxic Mist, which obviously mattered, but it basically decimated all of Melon's bulk. It got rid of the Mew, it got rid of the Rotom, and it heavily weakened the Lax and forced it to rest, which then allowed Neoligo to then just clean up late game. And it was also kind of cool to see non-Scarf Neoligo actually clean up in the end game, which is something I mentioned last week. So it was a really good job by Deebs. He redeemed himself, and this is the type of victories that I expected. When we first did all the scouting and we looked at everyone's applications, this was the type of match that I expected a lot from Deebs and what I expect from him moving forward. So I hope to see more of this, and this isn't a lot like, you know, Aaron's victory or Greg's victory or even Goldoa's. Make this consistent, not just a one-time thing.
I hope it doesn't feel at this point like I'm popping in and out from Tom's commentary. Obviously, we did mention earlier that it's a little bit more disconnected. But anyway, getting to Deebs, I really feel like Deebs didn't need to move up that much. I put him in at number 6 just because I feel like Randy is still shaky for me, and I'll explain that when we get to him. But Deebs, for me, didn't need to do a lot this week. He just set up Zard and finished the game. That was really it. It was really dependent on how poorly Melon played for him to get that win. There could have been multiple checks to Zard. Honestly, the Zygarde, if it were banded, for example, it could have knocked out Zard turn 1, realistically, or even Life Orb. Like, Life Orb 1,000 arrows into E-Speed would have destroyed the Zard, even though it was defensive. So there's a lot of little nitpicky things that I could get at, but ultimately Deebs won. So that's really all that matters, is that he was able to pick up the W, and we'll see if he's able to take this steam and move it on into further weeks. Hopefully he is. As Tom said, is one of the most promising players that we had from the applications. So let's hope that he can keep that up. And we're going to move on into my number 7 and Tom's number 6. I'm going to let Tom once again talk about Randy first.
Up next, we have the Texas Rangers, who had obviously lost. But again, I'm keeping them up above the Empoleon because until the Empoleon win again, not really quite convinced, but it was still a really good victory by Goldoa. This match, I felt like Randy felt nervous. He looked nervous. He didn't look comfortable whatsoever in how he was playing, what he was facing, and he just felt scared to the point where he played extremely safely. He didn't make any sort of aggressive read to the point that got him ahead of Melon. I feel like there was 2 points, one of which where he went for frustration, trying to KO something against Goldoa. And if he had clicked high jump kick as the extra drill had come in, he would have been in a much better position in the late game. I didn't like how he burned the Z-Fly with Steela when Earthquake could have done a little more damage. Now granted, it may have not KO the Victini, but as we saw, that Z-Fly did nothing. And it also ruined the offensive pressure that Steela could have applied, which, again, long game with the Ditto, maybe it really didn't matter. The Stealth Rock, the Ditto, combined pressured him to Mega Evolve early with Mega Lopunny in order to break a lot of Goldoa's team. The Flinch vs. Celesteal in the late game with the Scarf Drill pretty much sealed the victory for Goldoa. It sucked, but at that point, I think Randy was at the point that his tilt was nonstop and he couldn't really recover. The one criticism I have for Randy in this match is he needs to stop clicking Fake Out every time with Mega Lopunny. It almost got to the point where every time he just came in, Fake Out, just Fake Out, when he could have clicked high jump kick or made the aggressive read one time. And it wasn't even this week. It was other weeks as well, where if he made the aggressive read one time, he would have been in a position that maybe he could have beaten CJ, and maybe he could have beaten Goldoa. So that's really the only thing I have to say about Randy's playing and even his team building, where I think he has to trust his gut more and not overthink himself to the point where he's kind of putting himself behind because he tries to play safe or because he wants to ensure, you know, easy damage versus that one raw read that really puts him ahead. So if nothing else of the people below him, that's something he can fix because Megalop is a beast. Use it like the mono's supposed to be. That breaker, it doesn't need to click Fake Out, but has those moves that are just, you know, uncovered versus the vast majority of the metagame.
Absolutely. The big thing for me, though, with Randy is that he seems very uncomfortable. Tom mentioned it early on. but he seems very nervous in his matches, especially this one, more than any of the others so far. He really doesn't feel comfortable with the team that he's got, with the build that he's got, and then you actually get into the game, and he's second-guessing every single move that he makes. I would have liked to see him go for the low kick on the turn where the Ditto switched out. I believe it was into Drill, and I think that would have taken it out. So that was a pretty huge turn, allowing Drill to come in for free, forcing out the Mega Lopunny, was massive for him. It pretty much just sealed the game away, and he wasn't able to recover from there. And I know that Randy is making adjustments to his front office. I know that he's got Tom actually is in his front office now, so that should be interesting. He's got a lot of really good players that I know of that are there helping him out. I might even join in. So hopefully we see some improvement from him moving forward. Hopefully his building gets better. He has more help. Randy's a solid player on his own, but everybody needs help at some point or another, and Randy's seeking that, and he's gonna have it now. Hopefully that improves his chances, and we see slightly better builds moving forward, more interesting lop sets, maybe not Cosmic Power, but you know, I'm looking forward to what's gonna come out of that front office from here on out.
In other words, I'm cheering for Randy to do better. I think he will. He just needs to kind of tighten up his game a little bit. And of all the people in this like chunk from my rank at 6 all the way to 11, I think he's the one that can kind of rise above all of them, despite a loss to someone who, you know, may or may not be as highly ranked as he is in these rankings. At number 5, we have another team that lost. That'll be the Baltimore Orioles, coached by Troy CJ. Now, CJ, he didn't necessarily play badly. It's just Turbo was on a whole nother level, the same way CJ was on another level when he ended up beating Randy. So after really 2 good weeks, CJ was just kind of put up against something that he really couldn't stop, so to say. So he'll bounce back. It's just the Embor, which after the burn up pretty much forced CJ to sack 2 Mons, or at least forced 2 Mons to take really, really big damage. From there, he was basically put on the ropes because without Klefki and Swampert, he really didn't have the necessary checks for a few other of Turbo's walls. I will say he did a good job at ensuring that webs didn't inhibit his offensive speed, even after the Embor. But, it's still, he did give props where props were due. Turbo did bring a perfect Embor set, and it showed. And I'm not going to knock him for playing badly. He just played up against someone who played out of their minds. So, tough loss for CJ, but he'll definitely, do better as we move forward.
Yeah, we both moved CJ down 2 spots. It's kind of funny, actually. We have the same top 5, which is really nice. But we both kind of agree, I feel, that the only reason we moved CJ down was not for his play, not for his prep. I think he prepped and played very well. I think it's really just we're making room for people who are impressing us more, or who have similar records, better records, whatever the case may be. So I think that's really all it is. There's not much to say on CJ. I think that he still did a good job regardless. I think that he still brought the right sets. So long as he keeps doing that, he will find wins. If he's able to end the season on a 6-5 record or better, then he'll still make playoffs and we'll still see more of him. So until he shows me something that really makes me worry about him, I'm not going to move him down too hard. But we'll see what happens next week. If he's able to pick up another win, he'll probably rise back up. So I'll let Tom start us off on our number 4.
Next up, we have Danza and his Ally Nidoking at number 4. Now, Danza went up against someone who arguably was probably easy to beat, at least at this point, beating up a winless team. But there are some things to nitpick about Danza's play. He did let Florges get off massive damage across a lot of Danza's Mons. It either got chipped or it got it down to like yellow or red health. And he played around it up until he got Alolan Marowak in on the predicted Moonblast Psychic, which knew he can KO unless Zohan made the double read with Psychic twice instead of Moonblast Psychic, and was able to Pain Split on the Florges and then able to knock out Florges and Registeel. So it was cool seeing the Pain Split work, which I wasn't quite convinced that I was going to, but then in the end game when it actually did, That was really cool. So I give him props on that. I did thoroughly enjoy seeing him use Drampa and Alola Marowak, and it did so much work. Similar to how Greg's free agents made an immediate impact, this was really cool to see how Alola Marowak did, and then Drampa having its first appearance effectively shut down, if not KO, 4 of Sohan's 6 total mons. We're talking Marowak dealt with Florges and Registeel and recovered against either. And then Drampa covered the Pyroar and the Manaphy, and especially showed how it stopped the Manaphy. So that was really cool. I think Danza is showing that his week 1 match against Leo was a trip and not a fall. That it was a stumble, and maybe it was an adjustment, and it was up against someone who's currently perfect in the league right now. And I think that this Danza that you're seeing with his innovation and the way he's playing is the norm, I think, for Danza. And I think that he is one of the top teams, you know, whether it's in my rankings or in general, in this league. I definitely think that he's one of those teams that will make the playoffs really handedly.
I agree. No, I don't think that Danza's going to have a lot of issues moving forward. He does play Zazo next week, so we'll see what happens there. But he definitely showed us that he knows what he's doing. He's in control. I like that he has a Lolowak now as well. Helps him out with the stealth rocks, which have been a huge problem for me personally on his team as of late. But I think that he controlled the game super well, despite letting everything get low early on. Florges was a difficult thing for him to deal with, especially with the Spadef drops that came out. So I like how he played around everything. And he just saved what he needed to for the end game. The way that he switched out Drampa, knowing that he needed to deal with Pyroar later on, was just a very savvy play. You see that he's very aware of where the game is going, what's left, what he needs to conserve, how he needs to play. He's a veteran at this, and I think that so long as he continues to show us what he's got, he's gonna be a very, very potent threat even in playoffs. So yeah, that's it for Danza. We're gonna move on into both of our number 3s, somebody who took a little bit of a fall this week.
Next up, my number 3, someone who's not going to slide all that much, is Zazo and his Detroit Butterfrees. Zazo brought what, honestly, if you ask me, the JV squad or the B squad to someone who brought their A game. I say that because it looked like what Zazo brought, while it didn't deal with Leo's bulk, it definitely dealt with Leo's offense. The combination of Blaziken plus Smogon Burb did a really good job at checking both Magearna and the Mega Medicham. However, didn't quite do as much of a good job at checking Cress and the Miltank and the Alamomola. Now, if you ask me, this loss was better for Zazo than it was as a win for Leo, which I'll get to in a minute. The Sub Endeavor Mega Diancie set was cool, but it didn't necessarily work. Like, it got Nidoqueen down to 1 HP, didn't get rocks up, but I feel like it could have been a little bit more effective had he, used it a little bit later on and saved Diancie for a later opportunity. I do think that this was a strategy match. He bluffed the choice on Heracross, which was cool. Allowed him to get some big damage off against the Cress and even the Alamomola. Granted, the Aloe did show that it pretty much checked the Heracross in the late game. And then, of course, the Defog Choice Scarf Blaziken was really smart. Honestly, it got away with rocks at a necessary point where Zazo needed those rocks gone for Smogon Bird to possibly win. Granted, Mono Brave Bird with a team that has Magearna really didn't work out. But had he brought like Flare Blitz plus Brave Bird, I definitely think he could have won this match. I do think that Zazo has the tools to take down Leo's team of Magearna, Mega Medicham, and even like Zydog and Infernape. He played well, but he couldn't quite get through the bulk. And while this is a regular season win for Leo, I feel like Zazo has the opportunity in the playoffs once or if they meet to catch a W against Leo, knowing that he has the tools and the Mons capable of beating what Leo has in his offense and in his defense. So I think this is going to be a stepping stone for Zazo to get a win later on in the season. And it's a trip, like other teams, that he'll recover from moving on.
I feel you. I think that this was great for Zazo. A lot of people are going to say that, well, no loss is good. Well, in fact, considering the level of proficiency that Leo's team has, getting a loss against Leo this early in the season when you still have the ability to make transactions to fix up your team for playoff teams, and the fact that he didn't bring necessarily his A game against Leo is going to help him a lot if they meet in playoffs. And I know that Zazo's confident enough to get into playoffs, so I really do think that he made the right call bringing the sets that he did, because he could have still picked up a W considering the type of team that he brought. Leo just played very well around what Zazo brought, and I think there's nothing really Zazo could do to beat the Aloe plus the Cress and the Magirna core. So I think that Zazo has the upper hand moving forward. It just sucks to see him pick up a loss, of course, but we still have him at number 3. I think that he didn't do too badly considering the outcome and the way that the game played out. Guys, don't put a 6-0 on the sheet again. Thank you. Just going to say that. All right, anyway, moving forward into our number 2, I'm going to let Tom start to talk about who we believe really deserve to move up quite a bit this week.
Second to last, we have the Phoenix Midnights, coached by Turbo. And despite his thumbnail making me extremely uncomfortable, which that was a fucking weird thumbnail, dude. Like, you stop that. It was gross. Turbo played aggressively a lot like Deebs did, where he quivered turn 1, and that really pressured CJ and basically allowed Turbo to forego webs until a little bit later on, to the point where he was in, again, which is a common thing, he was in an offensively positive position that forced CJ to kind of get a little bit frazzled and go into like an alternate strategy that I don't think CJ wanted to do, seeing Masquerade, expecting it to merely just go for webs, and instead going for, you know, Quiver plus the Bug Buzz plus the Hydro Pump would have certainly, you know, pressured CJ to the point where he just was in a very negative position. And then even then, the Turbo still got webs up, and that also pressured CJ to get rid of the webs with Klefki, which also allowed Turbo to KO the Klefki with the Embor's Fire Blast. The Burn Up Grass Knot Scald Fire Blast tech for Embor was absolutely perfect, like I said earlier. It worked extremely well, and I gotta give him props for that set, which is why he's my number 2 this week. That was a perfect set. It worked. And that type of innovation is stuff you really don't see as much anymore in the draft community, where coaches don't have the type of opportunity to create those type of innovative sets that maybe aren't seen as much in draft building and draft planning. So props to Turbo for that one.
Yeah, the Ember set was sick. It was awesome. The way that he played his Masquerade early on, actually just the way in general that Turbo commanded the game, and the way that he had a game plan going in turn after turn after turn. You hear it in his commentary. If you guys haven't checked out his video, go and do so despite the weird thumbnail. You guys are really, really going to love the way that he explains every single turn, how hyped he gets about certain plays. He knows what he's doing. He's in the mindset. He's in the game. And this is why I feel that he deserves number 2, is that he feels way more confident than he did week 1. And week 1, he had a horrible matchup. Despite that, he came out with very low differential loss. So looking at that, looking at the fact that he's won the next 2 weeks, and the fact that Zazo obviously picked up this pretty big loss to Leo, I really feel like Turbo is more confident moving into the rest of the season than anybody else on the table. Other than maybe Leo, but we don't really get that sense from him, whereas Turbo is just like, yes, let's do it, we got this, let's go, let's beat every other coach that we have from here on out. He's made an adjustment to his team, which has helped him out. He's been using his Mont very, very well. I'm loving the way that Turbo's playing, and I've got no bad things to say about him whatsoever.
As a result of this match, I'm going to take back what I said about Embor in my post-draft commentary, meaning that Embor I thought was a bad pick for Turbo and a little redundant, but this week, and I think moving forward, it's going to be a powerhouse and it's going to continue to prove me wrong. Overall, Turbo played extremely well, and you know, he's playing with offensive momentum that many, many other coaches aren't using to their advantage. People like Randy, people like even like Zazo or Goldzilla, that there's opportunities they aren't taking, or if they are taking, it's maybe a little bit too late, or maybe it's spotty in cases. I feel like Turbo and Leo are doing a really good job at taking their offensive momentum and moving forward with it, absolutely trucking all the coaches they're coming across by making offensive reads and nice opportunities to be extremely threatening to whomever it is they're facing. I honestly think that the way that Turbo makes that read and gets offensive momentum and, like, you know, the flick, like, in a heartbeat, is probably one of his most threatening aspects on top of his innovative prep. So honestly, I think that watching Turbo's matches are some of my favorite each week, because you don't know what he's going to do. You don't know how many KOs Azumaril's going to get. It's going to be guaranteed too, but how many more is it going to be? Then what else is going to shine? So good job to Turbo. Expect more suck in the future. Finally, number 1, we have someone who I have been keeping at number 2. We have the Durham Dragons. Someone who played really well and scored a W, which, like I explained in Zazo's aspect, could be really good or could be, you know, what makes him catch an L in the playoffs. I like the offensive pressure and the doubles that were made from Leo. I felt like Leo at times created some of his own, like, tilt. He got a little bit nervous when he was facing the Talonflame, but he got back on track with the Stealth Rock from Nidoqueen versus the Slowbro. That was a good double that ended up paying off for him because he knew he outpaced it. Got the rocks up, which then forced Zazo to play a little more defensively to get to sack Blaziken to eventually get rid of rocks so that Talonflame could then, of course, be effective again. But I think Leo played extremely well. The Wisp passing this game was really cool and was so effective. Like, the way that he kept all of his walls alive throughout the entire game was something that was one of the reasons I actually drafted Alamola this past GBA season. You know, he kept Magearna and Nidoqueen really healthy. No, I'm sorry, Magearna and Cresselia really healthy. So that was really cool to see, and frankly, did a really good job with it. And he scored a W that allowed him to stay undefeated. So those are going to be my rankings. I don't know how Aster is going to close this. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll come back together next week, and we will be able to have, you know, our regular commentary, our regular banter back and forth. I feel like we're doing a really good job this season at bringing you guys good, effective commentary. Until next week, I will see you guys later.
As Tom said, I'm going to close this out here. I don't have a lot to say about Leo, really. He's been my number 1 since the very, very first week, so not much has changed. Realistically, it's kind of just a weird match, to say the least, because yes, Leo did control everything, but Zazo, again, didn't bring his A game, so it's hard to say. I really would have liked to see Zazo really try this game and bring things like SD on his Heracross, which would have helped him out a ton. Maybe he'll bring that in playoffs, who knows? But we'll see. But anyway, like Tom said, we're going to be back together next week, so it'll be a lot more entertaining. Sorry about this one, guys. Just scheduling conflicts and whatnot. But if you guys did make it to this far in the video, then thank you very much for watching. We do appreciate you guys. If you guys enjoyed, as usual, make sure to leave a like down below. Go and check out all the coaches, all the other analyst shows as well. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we will catch you guys next week. Ciao.